Every single year we deal with injuries. No matter what position it is, quarterback, wide receivers, running back, tight ends, there's always going to be injuries in fantasy football. But only 2 weeks into the season, there feels like there is a massive gap specifically at the running back position with all the injuries we have been seeing so far. So today, normally I will be bringing you my top 5 must trade for and trade away running backs going into week 3. But today I'm going to be bringing you something a little bit different. I want to show you every single running back that I believe that has value and where you should be valuing them, especially the way the market is right now. If you're struggling with injuries, maybe you have good running backs and having to predict for the future if these guys are going to get injured and who you guys should be keeping, trading away, holding, picking up off of waiver wires, whatever the case may be. So let's get straight into it here. Obviously, you can see it's broken down into every single category, and I will kind of explain it to you as we go. But what I really wanted to do first is give you every single running back that has been injured so far going into week 3. Obviously, our most recent injury, Nick Chubb here with he's out for the rest of the season, unfortunately, and we don't really know what is going to be happening and who's going to be the backup. Right now, we do expect it to be Jerome Ford, but we'll wait and see. Austin Eckler, timeline, there is no timeline, which is very unfortunate for Austin Eckler. Owners like myself, I thought it was a 1-week deal. Okay, he's going to miss 1 week, he'll come back, but now there's no timeline. I don't like that because last time he got injured, I think if it was 2-3 years ago now, there wasn't a timeline there and he missed 7 weeks, and I was really frustrated about that. Saquon Barkley, another most recent injury here, high ankle sprain. According to reports, he's not ruled out, quote unquote, for Thursday Night Football, depending on when you're watching this video. I doubt he plays, and I think he could be out for next week's game as well as a Giants fan. If he does come back, that's phenomenal. Aaron Jones, trending in the right direction so far, but somebody that has missed some time. He could miss another week coming into week 3, but we'll wait and see. And then the guys that we lost as well, J.K. Dobbins also done for the season with an Achilles injury. You probably drafted him in the early 4th round, 5th round, depending on how your leagues went and how deep your leagues are. Also unfortunate. Excuse me. David Montgomery, who also just got injured with if I'm not mistaken, a thigh or a hip injury. He's going to be missing. They say he's day to day. He could be missing a week or 2. We'll wait and see what that looks like. But another guy you are missing in your lineup. Also, in Monday night's game versus Saints and Panthers, Jamal Williams, he may not be an exciting name, but somebody that you were hoping have some sort of fantasy value in the first 3 weeks. Now he could be going on IR, missing 4 to 6 weeks with the injury that he has. That is, what's this, quick math, 2, 4, 6, 7 running backs so far that we are going to be missing at the moment, projected not to be playing going into week 3, and obviously other players missing for the rest of the fantasy season. That's not even predicting the other 15 games that we have coming up, because normally you see no injuries sporadic throughout the season, and we are already missing 7 of our, literally, you drafted 3 in the first round. Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley. Then you drafted the next 3 in Aaron Jones, J.K. Dobbins, and David Montgomery from rounds 4 to, let's say, round 8. And then Jamal Williams was just a bonus at these later rounds. So these are the guys that are injured so far. Now, my next 2 tiers you can see here is must keep and must keep part 2. These are guys that I am not moving whatsoever if I have on my team. It's going to be hard to trade for because some of these guys want to be saying, hey, I'll give you this high player for a running back because I need it. Before I even get to that, we have been getting so many questions in our comments, on our live streams, in our fantasy hotline saying, Zach, Badaki, what should we be doing? My running backs was Nick Chubb. My running backs was J.K. Dobbins. My running backs was Saquon. I need running backs. What do I do? Should I sell my Amon-Ra St. Brown? Should I sell my CD Lamb? Should I sell my top wide receiver to help myself in the running back position? No. You are not going to be selling your top wide receiver to get a running back, because there are still plenty of running backs out there that are going to be bringing you value, probably just not at the the ceiling that you were hoping for. You were probably hoping to get guys that can score you 20 plus 15 fantasy points on a weekly basis. That is not going to be the case anymore moving forward, in my opinion. At this very moment, I'm really happy if I get 8 to 12 fantasy points from a running back that you probably drafted in the 12th, 13th, whatever round, and later on in your drafts. Now it's going to be a little bit different, okay? But let's get into my must keeps here. Obviously, you're going to keep Christian McCaffrey. He is too valuable to keep. All these guys are too valuable. Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard, Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs, who not playing so well right now, but you draft him with the high draft capital. You're going to keep him. Kenneth Walker here, Joe Mixon, and Derrick Henry. These are my must-keep part one guys that I'm not trying to trade away whatsoever. These are the guys that I feel confident in moving into the future. These are my league winners, guys that you drafted in the first 3 rounds of your drafts, and you're not going to be trading them away because of how high of the draft capital you did send. Once again, I am not saying, hey, Devonta Smith for Josh Jacobs, Devonta Smith for Travis Etienne, T. Higgins for these guys. No, I'm keeping them. Even if those wide receivers are struggling, you want a PPR aspect where they're going to be getting so many more points later on in the season. I just feel more confident in my wide receivers over these running backs if they do go down based on your depth, obviously. All right, my must keep players part 2, running backs part 2. Once again, not trading these guys away. Ramondre Stevenson, James Conner, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Kyren Williams, a waiver wire that we just picked up a couple days ago now, literally week 1. He is a must keep. The way he's getting the production, what is happening over there in LA, this looks like a brand new team. I'm keeping Kyren Williams, Rachaad White, who just had a bounce back game, Brian Robinson, who just finished as a top 8 running back this past week, and same with Raheem Mostert. All these guys right now are must keeps for me. And the reason why specifically I'm going to touch on a couple names, obviously someone like Kyren Williams, like I just said before, Cam Akers is basically no longer on this team. We have no idea what's going to happen, and Kyren Williams has been given the keys to this backfield that I want to keep. If you picked him off waiver wires, let's say hypothetically you had a J.K. Dobbins in week 1, right? And you also had, let's say you had Bijan Robinson, who didn't have an amazing week 1 in fantasy, and you still lost, but you got the waiver wire priority in Kyren Williams. I'm still not selling Kyren Williams because of how short this running back, I guess, in the high ceilings where you can get 20 plus points, 15 plus points on a weekly basis. I am not selling someone like a Kyren Williams. Brian Robinson, who just had literally probably his best game of his career, was it 28 plus points this past week, finding the end zone multiple times, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not selling Brian Robinson because of how valuable and once again how short this is. Raheem Mostert, yes, he's 30 plus years old and he has a massive injury history, which I was telling you guys to sell earlier in the season, but clearly I wish I probably would have told you guys to keep Raheem Mostert with. Yeah, in hindsight, obviously, I wish I told you because of all these injuries that you would have had. If I drafted J.K. Dobbins and I drafted, let's say I got Saquon Barkley and J.K. Dobbins and I got Raheem Mostert in the later rounds, I wish I kept Raheem because of how vital it was for him to be on your team when J.K. Dobbins have went down, okay? So once again, all these guys I am not trading away. I know Jahmyr Gibbs has had a struggling games and we're not seeing the production, but with Monty missing a couple games, this really opens up the window and an opportunity for someone like a Jahmyr Gibbs to take the next step that we all expect and hope for, especially with our top 12 draft capital coming in. Now, I do have a buy low window. These are running backs that you probably spent a significant amount of draft capital on. I would say top 6 to top 7, really hoping for them to be a vital part of your team, but haven't performed so far. And let's say you're 2-0 and you have all this wide receiver depth that you're probably not even starting on your team right now. These are some players that I believe you can buy low that can have bounce back games in the future and can help your team. Okay, Alexander Madison is my first one. Didn't have the best game this past week. I truly believe he could have a bounce back game, but he is somebody that I'm really scared of as well, right? Only 76% of the snaps scored 4.9 fantasy points that game. In week 1, his day was saved by going into the end zone, but had a tough matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who was a better defense than what we expected, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Now he's playing the Chargers, one of the worst you know, teams that to give up the most fantasy points to the running back position, that could be a good bounce back game for Alexander Madison. Miles Sanders, also another player that has another good matchup coming into this week. Didn't have the best 2 first weeks of the season. He played the Saints, and then he also played the Atlanta Falcons, if I'm not mistaken. I think he will have another bounce back game coming into this week. He is playing the Seattle Seahawks. They give up the most fantasy points to the running back position. The Chargers give a top 5 most points to the running back position. So just wanted to clarify that. Najee Harris, who also had a terrible game, just hasn't been playing well either. You kind of week 1, 5.3 fantasy points, 6 attempts on the ground. I don't care how down you are, get Najee Harris the ball on the ground or in the air. He only caught 2 out of 2 passes in week 1 versus San Fran. Granted, okay, week 2 against Cleveland on Monday night, only 10 attempts on the ground, caught 3 passes or had 3 targets in the air. Najee Harris has been struggling. You probably spent a 4th round draft capital on him for somebody that barely has gotten 12 points on the season so far in 2 weeks. That is a struggling, which could be a good buy low window. Once again, if you have the depth at the wide receiver position, and maybe somebody that has Najee Harris is struggling, and maybe they also have the depth, whatever the case may be, you can do swaps and kind of play that game, right? Do you want Raheem Mostert or Najee Harris long term? Right now, you want Raheem Mostert, which sounds crazy, but we all know the injury history with Raheem, where I do believe this could be a good buy low window for Najee Harris. Dameon Pierce, a guy that I love coming into this offseason and coming into this season, and he's just not the same. Not that he's not the same player. This offense specifically, I would say, is not good for his suit. CJ Stroud is clearly a good, competent quarterback who I believed in. I just didn't think they would be leading on the passing game as often as I expected them to. I thought they would be running the ball a lot more. Dameon Pierce hasn't been that person to run the ball. I mean, CJ Stroud has thrown for over 35 attempts per game, which I thought wasn't going to be the case as a rookie quarterback, but obviously that's a little bit different. Dameon Pierce, 6.7 points in week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens, and then 5.5 fantasy points going against the Indianapolis Colts, who also gave up a lot of fantasy points to the running back position coming into week 2. And that clearly wasn't the case here with Dameon Pierce, as they were down early in that game. And my last guy here that is a good buy low window is Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams, I think, is still getting, you know, acclimated into this offense with this injury. He's still trying to understand what his role is, I believe. I think Sean Payton is still trying to understand what Javonte Williams' role is coming into this year. And look, right now, didn't have the best game. Once again, only 7.8 fantasy points, 12 attempts on the ground, caught 2 out of 3 passes. So I think his workload will increase as the season goes on. But these are guys that I want to be targeting if I had the opportunity. And here are some players, some wide receivers that, hey, maybe you picked off of waiver wires and say, I'd rather, and somebody is really hounding you for this guy, and they have one of these players. Once again, take these names that I'm going to say with a grain of salt, because anything can happen once this video releases. But players that I'm thinking of right now, Rashid Shaheed, wide receiver 22 on the season so far. I'd rather take, if I could send Rashid Shaheed and maybe somebody else to get a Najee Harris, absolutely. What about a Tutu Atwell who just had a decent game? I know this sounds crazy because you probably pick these guys off of waiver wires. A Josh Reynolds who had 2 back-to-back decent games, right? I mean, you could throw Nico Collins out there if you are really struggling at the wide receiver position, but that's somebody I would keep in the long haul, right? You also think of players like Robert Woods or Michael Thomas. I think Michael Thomas is a good name, a big high caliber name that people used to love. Do you believe that he can stay healthy for the rest of the season? At the moment, with the glimpses, he does look healthy. He does look like the old MT, but that production is not there for MT that I expected. Can I get a Dameon Pierce back? Can I get an Alexander Madison with the pass catching upside, a Najee Harris, a Miles Sanders? I'm willing to do that if I can send Michael Thomas and acquire any one of these guys. Okay, let's go to my next one, boom or bust. These are guys that I believe can one day get you 2 fantasy points, or the next get 28 plus fantasy points, which we have already seen coming into the last 2 weeks of the season. So if you can get these guys, some of these guys may be on waiver wire. Some of these guys, you know, you have on your team that you're probably not expecting. Say, oh, maybe I should trade him away, trade him high. No, you need to keep him because of how much, so many injuries there are in the running back position. I do not want to sell these guys. Just just because of anything can happen. I know you probably are rocking with Travis Etienne and Tony Pollard right now, and you are living life, you're flying high, you're 2-0, you're saying, I don't gotta worry. Travis Etienne missed some time last year. Tony Pollard, now he has a full workload. Can he handle that workload when he gets into tougher matchups? And then what if one of those guys go down and you have one of these guys on your team? Once again, boom or bust plays, but hey, anything can happen. Obviously, our most recent injury with Nick Chubb, his backup in Jerome Ford, a guy that I love coming out of Cincinnati. I do believe he's a good, viable backup. Now, as I'm recording this video, we don't know if someone like a Kareem Hunt, a Leonard Fournette, whatever the case may be, is going to be coming and joining this team. What I would say is that I'm not necessarily sure they're going to bring someone like a Kareem Hunt, who they had in this same back last year. Think about it. You had Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and Jerome Ford in this backfield. And you said, coming into this year, you said, thank you for your services, Kareem, but we're going to go with Jerome. Do they do that now with the options that they have? I'm not necessarily sure they bring in Kareem, especially with the money that he's probably asking for. Tyler Algier, who also had a very interesting game his week 1, but I did tell you he was going to be a trap coming into week 2. Look, I think he played all right. I think he's going to have some fantasy validity to him. Week 1 against the Cardinals, 24 fantasy points, did decent on the ground, 15 carries, over 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. I wonder what that would look like without those 2 touchdowns, and if we still would want to have him on our team and having the same conversation that we do have. And then coming into week 2 with Green Bay, 16 attempts, under 5 fantasy points. That is the boom or bust that you can expect. I do expect Bijan Robinson to continue to increase his workload coming into the season. I don't know. If you do have Tyler Algier, I'm happy to hold if you are struggling at the running back position. And you're going to be happy with, you have to be happy, to be honest, with under 10 points, or obviously you'll be ecstatic if he gets over 20 points. Swifty. This is an interesting name. Everyone loves DeAndre Swift. Everyone believing in DeAndre Swift. Obviously, week 1, I think, what do you have? Like one carry for 3 yards. Had 1 point. I think he caught a pass in that game as well in week 1. And then week 2, my guy looked like the best running back. He had a career game. 28 attempts on the ground. Literally a career attempt on the ground. Career yards on the ground as well. 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averaging over 6 yards per carry, over 27 fantasy points that game. That is not something that is viable for DeAndre Swift. Now, as the season prolongs, is that going to maintain? 1, can he stay healthy? 2, are they going to continue to run the ball with him, all based on game script? We expected DeAndre Swift to be the pass-catching back, not the guy that's getting the opportunities on the ground, right? So I think I can kind of see this boom or bust kind of play for DeAndre Swift. But if you have him on your team and you drafted him, don't sell him high. Remember, you with this running back room, look, I would say this. I keep saying don't sell these players high. If you have the depth in the running back room, I understand if you want to sell. Let's say you have Tony Pollard, Travis Etienne, right? You draft in the first 2 rounds, and then you got a James Cook. That's fair. I understand. And then you got DeAndre Swift in one of these other rounds, and you're saying, well, I can get another wide receiver. Sure, do that. But if you have an Aaron Jones, a Travis Etienne, and then let's say a Dameon Pierce, and then you have a DeAndre Swift, I'm not selling because of how up and down these guys have been producing so far for your team on a week-to-week basis. And it's only week 3, going into week 3, right? Okay. Let's go to his teammate and Kenneth Gainwell, another boom or bust play, a guy who in week 1 had over 11 fantasy points, carried the ball 14 times in week 1 against the New England Patriots. Now, we don't know what this backfield is going to look like when Kenneth Gainwell does come back. But if that is the case, this could be a 50-50 backfield. And then we're saying we have another split backfield with like a lot of these other teams, like a Monty and Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Maybe one's a pass catching back, maybe one's not. Whatever that looks like, I'm not necessarily sure if I want to give up on Kenneth Gainwell right now. So that's why I put him in the boom or bust category. All right, now my next 2, I think a lot of people are going to disagree, but I have the Jets running back in Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. These are my last 2 in the boom or bust. Obviously, we saw what Breece Hall did. He is clearly not 100% still. He is clearly not conditioned. He had 10 carries, for over 125 yards in week 1 against the Bills, which was phenomenal. 100%. I understand. We saw Brees always like, this guy is doing it all, and my guy is not even 100% in shape. Once he gets to that in the second half of the season, just like a lot of people drafted him in the 4th round, right? 5th round, depending on your league. I would say 3rd or 4th round, people were drafting him. That's where he was going in our leagues, right? You drafted him with that high draft capital for a reason, because you expect him to come back. Don't sell him high now. Keep him, right? And once again, this could be changing coming into next week. Next week, you have more running back injuries. Or next week, Aaron Jones, Saquon, Austin Eckler does all come back. And it's like, all right, we got some more options, right? Maybe Monty does come back. Hypothetically, whatever the case may be, there could be some good, viable opportunities. And then Dalvin Cook, even though he looked atrocious in week 1, he could definitely find some opportunity if Brees Hall is still struggling when he does come back. Let me remind you what he did this past week. 4 carries, 7 yards. He also fumbled the ball, if I'm not mistaken. He had 0.2 fantasy points. That is not something that you expect from Dalvin. But in week 1 against Buffalo, he caught 3 out of 3 passes, just over 8 fantasy points. I am happy. If Dalvin Cook right now is still getting 50% of the workload, especially when Brees Hall's coming back and he's getting me 8 to 12 fantasy points, I'll be okay with that. But I also can see Dalvin Cook getting, 15 plus fantasy points in some games if Zach Wilson or maybe Tim Boyle does step up a little bit. All right, players that I'm happy with 7 to 12 points. These are players that if I'm really struggling at the running back position and I'm saying, dang, I just, for example, I had J.K. Dobbins, okay? I have J.K. Dobbins and I had James Conner. James Conner week 1 did terrible. J.K. Dobbins obviously went out with the ACL, and then I picked up Justice Hill, and I started him in saying, I am just happy if he gets me 7 to 12 points. And this is that category, because he may not win you your leagues, but he's somebody that's just going to contribute and maybe just get you just enough points to help you win in your fantasy league, since you have been struggling with your depth at the running back position, okay? Khalil Herbert, Isaiah Pacheco, Damian Harris, Zach Moss, Samaje Perine, Jalen Warren, Gus Edwards, and then Justice Hill. These are all the guys that, look, I'll be honest with you, any point in time, these guys can get, 15 plus fantasy points. We saw that with Zach Moss already. Really just saw that with Zach Moss. We haven't seen 15 plus fantasy points from any of these guys. We saw about a 12-point game for Gus Edwards last week in week 2, where he got into the end zone. Samaje Perine's got a lot of work in the air. It looks like Jalen Warren and Najee Harris are going to be splitting this backfield with the snap counts that you can look at. Damian Harris finally found the end zone in week 2, got over 9 fantasy points that week. Isaiah Pacheco, who could come into a good workload in week 2, we'll see. And then in week 3, and Khalil Herbert, who has been atrocious, you kind of been expecting Roscoe to get more workload. You're just happy with 7 to 12 fantasy points at this very moment. So once again, guys that saying, you know what, I like the matchup, let's just close my eyes and put them in, because you're not necessarily sure what's going to happen. And not only that, you're going to be coming into bye weeks. Bye week start in week 5, and if these guys, our top guys in the injured category here, do miss significant amount of time, obviously outside of Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins, do miss a significant amount of time, you're still going to be struggling at the running back position, saying, if Samaje Perine gets me 11 points, I'm happy. If Jalen Warren gets me 8 points, I'm happy. And that's exactly how we need to envision coming into, I think, I would say in the next 2 to 3 weeks, until we get a little bit more of a reassurance with all these injuries that are happening at the running back position. Because once again, even if I have depth at the running back position, I'm not trying to sell them high, because I need to secure myself. I need to secure my own team. All right, I got 2 last ones here. Got about 5 minutes, it says on my clock. High upside backups, which we've kind of seen already so far. Some of these guys really take their next step here. Joshua Kelly, even though he played literally the least, the Titans gave up the least amount of points to the running back position. I said it was a trap coming into this week. That was proven true. But if Austin Eckler is going to miss some time, he is playing the Minnesota Vikings this week, if I'm not mistaken. So he could go find the end zone, especially with how high powered this offense is. Roscoe, which we already saw him getting 20 plus fantasy points in week 1. If Khalil Herbert is not this guy, which we'll see this switch happening, if he is available on waiver wires in some of your league, I don't know if he is in some, I'm willing to pick him up immediately. Devon A-Chain, I know I've kind of been off this guy, but if Raheem Mostert, who I've kind of been predicting goes down, Devon steps up, and I know he missed the first couple weeks, but we'll wait and see. Jet McKinnon, we all know what happens with Jet. You know, once they get on the rhythm, you throw, you know, Patrick Mahomes throws to him, it's a 40-yard catch and a run and a touchdown, and you're saying, I am buzzing every single day, right? If you have a Breece Hall, hypothetically, you drafted Javonte Williams, Breece Hall, and I don't know, let's say you had Nick Chubb and you had got Jerome Ford off the waiver wires, but Jerry McKinnon has the best matchup going into the NFL in week 7. Jet McKinnon might be the guy you want to start just based off of the high upside play that he could be bringing you. All hypotheticals, just wanted to bring that to the conversation. Same thing with Antonio Gibson. Even though he's been struggling, Brian Robinson has been very successful so far, but once he does go down, like he missed time, Antonio Gibson, if I'm not mistaken, the first 4 weeks of the season, he was like a top 25, top 28 back, and you were happy with the production that he was getting. A minimum of, what, 7 to 12 points last year. But if Brian Robinson does go down, high upside backup. Tajay Spears, who's already been getting significant amount of work in the air, didn't have the best game this past week. Look, this past week, Tajay Spears got 7.5 fantasy points, but you're happy with that. But, you know, you're happy with what that's going to be, how he's going to be producing, and then he's going to continue to grow as the season progresses with Derrick Henry. And my last one, which I'm not too excited for, but you kind of have to put him in the category, and that's A.J. Dillon. I'm not a massive believer in A.J. Dillon. Personally, I think if he couldn't do it without Aaron Jones last week in a decent matchup, I'm not necessarily sure if A.J. Dillon can do it at all at any point in time. They clearly were abandoning the run game. They don't believe in AJ, and I don't believe in him either. And I think you need to see that in the head coach. 15 carries, 55 yards, scored 7.3 fantasy points. He needs to be better, especially with the opportunities that he should be getting, okay? So those are my high upside guys. And then my TBC, my to be determined of what this is going to look like. Obviously, when Alvin Kamara comes back, he's going to be phenomenal. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor and whatever that workload looks like. Okay, so I think that's a kind of a given with these two guys. Cam Akers, we have no idea what happens, but what if he does get traded to some of these teams? What if he gets traded to Miami? What if he gets traded, to the Browns? There are so many teams that he can go to. Maybe he has some new life in him with a new team. We'll wait and see. Okay, Matt Breida, obviously Saquon Barkley is projected to miss 3 weeks. Maybe he does get some opportunity because he is playing the Seattle Seahawks in week 4. And if Saquon Barkley is not 100%, the Seattle Seahawks give up the most fantasy points to the running back position. And then obviously Kareem Hunt is a big one where if he does get picked up and he's on your waiver wires, he is somebody that you are prioritizing to pick up right now, just in case he does go to, once again, back to the Cleveland Browns, so on and so forth. Guys, hopefully that is helpful going into week 3. If you are struggling at the running back position and you're thinking about selling your top wide receiver, your top tight end, your top quarterback, please, please, please don't do that. Please wait. Because when your running back does come back, or if you have a high waiver wire priority, you could win your league still. Anything can happen. Don't panic right now. Maybe you're 0-2. You had Nick Chubb and you had David Montgomery as your RB2. And you're saying, I need to make a move. I understand if you have to force yourself to make a move and you're saying, I need to figure out something. But don't give the house. Don't give the house. If you have Tyreek Hill and you need a running back and your best offer right now is Kenneth Walker and you're going to sell him lower than expected, don't do that. Please don't do that. Comment down below with any fantasy questions that you have, any running back situations that you have, any trade questions that you have. We can help you moving forward. Right now, hold and pause on trading away running backs. If you can trade for, I'm all for it. That's fantastic. If somebody wants to give away their running backs with the way the market is right now, 100% take advantage of that. But if you are somebody that is struggling, don't trade away your top fantasy players, once again, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, to acquire a running back. Okay, hopefully that is helpful. Once again, comment down below, like the video. As always, good luck going into week 3. And before I do go to flogfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what Zach and I are doing here. Zach is bringing out over 300 players that you should be starting week in and week out going into week 3. Wide receivers, running backs, tight end, defenses, and so much more. Not only that, you can get a fantasy hotline where you have questions like this. You need help at the running back position. I need help with trades. I need help with start sits. Flockfantasy.com/lane. You get our hotline and all of our must start sits going into each and every week for the rest of the 2023 fantasy season, guys. So once again, like, comment, subscribe, and as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.